When most people find out about 2b2t for the first time because of a big YouTuber, they often picture the server as this never-ending and ever-evolving war zone, full of insane battles, crazy ambushes, carefully planned raids, the list goes on. When in reality, apart from the odd encounter at a base grief, or that one 12-year-old spawn fag who'll dox your entire family bloodline if you kill him at spawn, 2b2t really doesn't have much of that stuff going on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, the majority of conflict between players and groups, which there is a lot of, doesn't even take place on the Minecraft server itself, rather external platforms such as Discord. In my opinion, it's a real shame that this entire side of 2b2t is never really seen by the general player base. In fact, chances are if you're not a high-ranking member of a group or the leader of a group itself, then you tend not to know at all what happens behind closed doors. You only really see the result of what happens in the form of big projects, spawn events or bases. So much shit goes on 2b2t outside of the public eye that I think could be really cool to talk about and present to you all, as I'm probably the only 2b2t YouTuber that's actually in the position to do so. Along with my Norwegian friend Imems, I have been running a pretty active and successful 2b2t group since September of 2018, called the Backstreet Boys of 2b2t, so it's pretty safe to say that I've seen my fair share of block game autism over the past 2.5 years, having had conflicts with countless groups and players throughout that time. In this video, we're going to be taking a dive into the largely unseen and undocumented world of 2b2t groups and the people that lead them, what makes some groups prosper, and what makes most new groups completely fail, and of course, the different assortment of ways groups like to fuck with each other. So yeah, I think this video is going to be hella fun to make, and hopefully will be entertaining for you lot too. It's been a while since I last uploaded, so hopefully this will make up for it. Alright, let's go. For many players on 2b2t, the prospect of starting up and running your own epic block game faction can be an incredibly exciting thought, and it's no wonder why there always seem to be so many of these new groups being set up pretty much every week on the server. However, as fast as these new groups seem to come, they often fade into obscurity or just get outright deleted almost as quickly, with very few ever really being able to become anything more than just a meme group. So what's going wrong? Why is the current climate of groups on 2b2t so stagnant? Well, I think that the problem lies not just with the actions of aspiring group leaders, but the types of people who are trying to set up groups themselves. For the most part at least, it seems to be comprised of basically new fags and fit fags, and that's not me trying to say herder new players bad. It should be pretty obvious to assume that to run a 2b2t group for yourself, you actually have to have had some experience playing the bloody server, and had some decent experience with groups prior. For example, when I co-founded BSB in 2018, I had already been playing 2b2t and been in a group for about 4 months, which isn't actually that much, but look at Bucky Buck, leader of the Infinity Incursion. When he founded II, he had been playing 2b2t for well over a year, and had been in the 2b2t group BSB for well over 6 months. If you want to start a group primarily based on building, then you probably don't need to have had as much exposure to the 2b2t group climate as would someone trying to start a spawn project group, but come on, chances are if you're a new player and you go out there trying to create the next massive empire, you're just going to end up getting bumfucked by players that actually know more about the server than what you heard in 2FitMC videos. So yeah, I guess step 1, have some decent experience of the server. Now, that's the easy part. There are still many groups set up by established 2b2t players that, just like the new fags, seem to fail within weeks. So let's talk about some reasons why. One thing that I see a lot of groups do is trying to become too big way too quickly, and completely crashing down as a result of it. This mostly happens when the few founding members of the group start to get bored, and don't really seem too inclined to play the server. In an attempt to stimulate activity and group growth, the owner will start to invite loads of random people into the group, a good portion of which will most likely be people joining to either troll or just inside. And whilst a bigger group can usually take the hit of a couple insiders, a small group just starting out with only a handful of members will have their morale completely destroyed as a result of it. Which brings me to my next point about the very most important thing for pretty much any group, which is ultimately member morale. However many neck-bearded man-children try to tell you otherwise, 2b2t at the end of the day is just a game, and the people playing it, for the most part, play it because it's fun and it gives them enjoyment, and you, as a group leader, are partially responsible for providing them with that enjoyment. Otherwise, what's the point in being in your group in the first place? And this is where I see so many smaller groups go wrong, whether it's through creating a retardedly long set of annoying rules, forcing members to donate items to the group, or just the owner pinging at everyone whenever they go outside to eat a sandwich. They often counterintuitively create an environment which makes 2b2t less enjoyable for the members, and creates a pretty shitty pros and cons list for joining. If you look at the majority of big 2b2t groups, they rarely have many limitations for their members. Outside the basic don't leak private stuff and don't be a 12-year-old rule, members are usually free to do basically whatever they please on 2b2t, as long as it doesn't negatively affect the group. A key part of running a group is actually to be good friends with the members, and not just treat them like a pawn to do shit you're too lazy to do. People often have the misconception that the members of a 2b2t group need to work hard for the leader, so they can rise through the ranks and become a so-called big player. But for a group to succeed, the owner of the group has to put just as much work in to provide things to do and make sure everything runs smoothly. Otherwise, members just won't be motivated to play, simple as. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say on the topic of new 2b2t groups. It's pretty funny how you can see the same mistakes being made time and time again by new and established players alike, and I hope that if you're watching right now and you have been thinking about setting a group up, that this may help you to not make the same mistakes as countless players before you, so that you won't end up being bullied off of the server. You're welcome. But I'm sure the vast majority of you watching right now are mainly just interested to learn about how 2b2t groups work, without ever really wanting to start one for yourself. It's honestly not something I would recommend if you ever want to feel the touch of a woman or have an IRL life ever again. So yeah, let's move on to the more exciting shit. Just like in the real world, for as long as there have been groups of players on 2b2t, there have always been conflicts between them, and unlike the real world, where these conflicts are usually over like oil or which religion lets you marry the most underage children or something, on 2b2t it usually boils down to people just being bored and wanting to mess with another group for fun or to get some cheap clout. But it can sometimes escalate to the point at which two sides seriously dislike each other, and that's when stuff gets interesting. Whether it's anything from simply spamming in chat and killing enemy group members at spawn, all the way to hardcore insiding, blackmail, and even sometimes bringing block game conflict into the real world in the forms of doxing and ratting, if you can think of a method to try and one-up someone on 2b2t, whether it's ethical or not, chances are that someone's already tried it. And it's this kind of dedication, this kind of edgy neck-bearded ruthlessness that, like many things, is incredibly unique to 2b2t, and is really interesting to be a part of. But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about how to destroy a group. Alright, let's set the scene. The year is 2021, and you own a new active group of 2b2t players that have just started to see some recognition from the 2b community. Everything is going well, you're building a nice base, you're doing some PvP at spawn, you're doing some griefing maybe, a little bit of trolling, until one day you see that another group leader has just called you gay and
the N-word in 2b2t public chat.
And of course, you're coping and seething. How dare he say such offensive things about you? You must get your revenge. Naturally, you must completely destroy his group or die trying. But how do you go about doing this? How does one group completely destroy another on a server as autistic as 2b2t? Well, let me tell you, there's never really that one satisfying moment where a group just collapses in on itself and dies. It's usually a long-winded process of slowly chipping away at the enjoyment of its members. Groups constantly go through cycles of being really active one month to being fairly inactive the next, and you just gotta nudge them in the right direction to stay inactive for a little bit longer. For example, if the group's trying to do a big spawn project or event, go mess with it and make it harder. Or if they're building a base, go grief it and then grief the next. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. To do all this, you actually have to have someone in the group, an insider as they're creatively named on 2b2t. So to do this, a group is usually presented with two options. The first, and on the off chance it works, the easiest option, is to just somehow convince a member of the group you're trying to incite to betray their own group and leak stuff directly to you. You may think that this sounds like a dumb idea and will rarely ever work, and you'd be mostly right. However, it is possible. You just need to go about it with great care. Try and research the group and its members, maybe get on an alt and talk to them a little. Groups can often have internal conflicts that can lead to some members losing interest, and if they're for whatever reason really pissed off, they may be willing to give you some information about the group to get back at them. However, this is only really feasible with smaller, newer groups. As I said earlier, a big part of what makes a 2b2t group successful is the members of said group actually being good friends with one another, so it's unlikely for people to betray their friends' trust over dumb small shit. So only really attempt this if you have a clear person to target, and you know for sure that there is a high chance of them giving to you what you want. Otherwise, if you hit up every single member in the group with some LARPy DM like, "Hello bro, I heard that your leader called your mother obese, please give me base chords," all that's gonna happen is that the members are gonna tell their leader that you've been DMing them, and not only are they now going to know that someone's trying to actively incite them, they're just gonna make fun of you for being dumb, which really isn't a good look. The second and more traditional method of inciting is to either get yourself, an alt, or a friend to apply for and hopefully get into the group and slowly work their way through the ranks until finally having collected enough information, and preferably base coordinates, to use against them. It seems though, as time has gone on, this method of inciting has gotten much harder, and therefore you don't see it happening nearly as much as you would have done a year or so ago. This is mainly because the way in which groups find and recruit new members has drastically shifted over the past couple of years. Traditionally, the way in which you would find new people to join your 2b2t group would go something along the lines of this. Firstly, you spam your Discord link in chat or on Withers or with death messages or even on the Reddit, advertising how cool and epic your team is, in the hopes that lots of interested new players who are looking for a group see it and join your Discord server. Then you have a bunch of new people in your server, you use a simple application form to filter out the complete retards, maybe a voice call interview too. Then you would most likely set up a bunch of recruit bases to test the abilities of your new recruits. And of course, being that these were recruit bases, they would quickly get griefed by shit tier insiders who would then big them up to be your main base on the subreddit. And by doing this, you could fairly easily get a sense of who the good members were among all the new fags, and those are the people who would move up the group ladder, if you will. And this is great and all, especially when you got lucky, you could get some really awesome spawn bases out of it. However, these recruit bases could be pretty costly. First for a reason I'm going to cover later on in the video, but also because of the cost of all the raw materials needed to do so. Luckily, back then, 2b2t had just experienced the biggest dupe in its history, the chunk dupe, followed by a ton of donkey desync dupes, so this didn't really matter. However, now, a few double chests of building materials can be fairly valuable to a group due to the fact that there hasn't been a good public dupe in over a year, and most people are pretty poor right now. So now in 2021, many groups have realized that this old method of recruiting is very inefficient. You see, going back to what I was saying earlier about only the half-competent, not brain-dead people being able to progress into the group, the rest of them, all the new fags, fit fags and children, would just essentially be told to go elsewhere and would end up just leaving the server. And this, my friends, is a huge waste of potential. And so groups have come to realize that instead of just casting these undesirable new fag members aside, why not continue to use them to benefit the group at little to no risk, but in a way that still allows for the odd half-decent member to be noticed and invited higher up into the group. And this may sound like a difficult, if not near impossible thing to achieve, but that really isn't the case, hence the Spawn Project. For the entire lifespan of 2b2t up until about 2 years ago, big spawn projects were few and far between, usually only reserved for incursions and YouTube invasions. However, nowadays, there seems to be a big project going on 2b2t basically every day, and this is no coincidence. Whether it's water cubes, massive walls, spawn logos, clearing terrain, or even paving highways, projects like these are incredibly good for recruiting new members due to a myriad of factors, including the fact that they are fairly immune to insiding, are a great way to find out who is hardworking, usually only require a bunch of obsidian to accomplish, and of course allow for recruits who would previously not been able to contribute to anything to now help accomplish the group's goal. And this is great. throw a few meaningless Discord ranks in there to help create a fake sense of succession, and bang, you have a perfect way to grow your group and get your name out there at the same time. Whilst as a group leader, you'll probably have a fairly good idea whether or not someone's going to make a decent member, only after a few times in a VC with them. You don't want to let them know, of course, as it will ruin the entire thing. You need to create and maintain an environment where any new fag and their mum can join and help out with your project, all the while thinking that if they work hard enough and contribute enough, that they will be able to progress into the group, when in reality, they're only really ever going to get anywhere if they're mature and chill to talk to in VC, because at the end of the day, groups are just friends who like playing block game together. If you want a really good example of this, then take a look at the Infinity Incursion. They basically pioneered this whole concept of turning would-be rejects into useful slaves, and were pretty much the biggest, most influential group on 2b2t during 2020 as a result of it. And although this was partially contributed to by the perfect storm of having everyone stuck at home and willing to sink hundreds of hours into Minecraft, due to the whole funny 2020 thing, not mentioning Backy Backback and the Infinity Incursion's role in basically revolutionizing this big part of how 2b2t groups work in 2021 would be incredibly unjust. But anyway, back to what we were talking about, insiding. The reason why I say it's much more difficult in this day and age is because with this new way that groups tend to go about recruiting, there is a much stronger focus on grinding and hard work, if you will. Before, as long as you were a good builder and had some decent social engineering skills, then it was relatively simple to inside groups. It was still a lot of work and took a significant amount of time. However, the type of person that tends to enjoy insiding does so because, you know, they enjoy it and they don't mind spending time doing these kinds of things like social engineering 12-year-olds. Now though, you may have to spend tens of hours doing some repeated task in Minecraft just to get noticed. And this can be incredibly boring and just make it not worth it for someone to do, just so that they can blow up one shitty dirt shack. There is also the possibility that the person you get to try and inside a group may just end up befriending the group's members and no longer wanting to inside, which just makes the whole ordeal a huge waste of time on your end. However, let's move on and assume that a group has successfully managed to infiltrate another group. What now? Well, it's not actually as simple as just going off and BDSM cock and ball torturing their base, because this really would be a big waste of an opportunity, because getting the insider into the group in the first place was incredibly hard. If you try start from scratch all over again, well, chances are that the group would have learnt from its mistakes and made it a lot harder for you to do so. So why not try and deal damage to the group, whilst not making it seem like your insider is the one causing it? And there are a few ways to do this. For example, a commonly used one is just to wait until the group invites another couple of people to whatever base you want to grief, and then when you rock up there with your TNT in hand, the group's probably just gonna assume it's one of the newly joined members who leaked it and kick them out instead. Or you could wait until a trusted member is logged in at the base, then go there with an alt account and just act like you're a new fag who randomly came across it. Then when you grief it, you can make it seem like this person that they believe is a random new fag that just so happened to stumble across their base just leaked it or something. Even spam the chords and chat with your alt when you're close to getting there so that it's more believable. There really are many ways to go about it. Okay, so now that we have spoken about how to get away with insiding and griefing a base, finally let me tell you about one of the most important and best ways that groups can win a quote-unquote war on 2b2t. And this is something that I've never heard be mentioned to the public before, but at the same time it's something that almost every successful group does really well. And I really don't want to sound too larpy here when I say this, but I'm sure you have all heard the common phrase, history is written by the victors, and this actually applies fairly well to 2b2t. Not really in the same sense of actual history, but more in the sense that whoever is winning and on top in the eyes of the public tends to be the one who comes out on top overall. You see, a large amount of the wider 2b2t player base don't really have the time to live on Discord 24/7 like me, and so they tend to know much less about the day-by-day events taking place on the server. You know, like which group did this, what's the current big meme, what base just got griefed, what's the latest weird exploit, that kind of thing. And so they usually just rely on the Reddit and YouTube videos to tell what's going on, and oh boy, can you use this to your advantage. By uploading videos and posts to these sites of your team blowing up another group's bases and killing their members at spawn, you can seriously hurt their reputation in the eyes of 2B2T pop culture. This is if you can actually make the content good enough to the point that it gets pushed by the sites you're posting on, of course. This is also why earlier when I was talking about the benefits of big spawn projects, I said that what we are talking about now, publicity, was one of the biggest reasons for their importance. Because spawn projects are an insanely good way of getting your group's name out there nowadays. Nobody really seems to give a shit for more than 10 minutes anymore about any awesome looking group bases that get shown off, and people don't usually care about any bases that you're flexing about blowing up because it happens all the time. Whilst spawn projects, for some reason, they are basically the massive dick measuring contest for groups nowadays. That's really all they are, an easy way to motivate group growth and activity, and most importantly, what gives the most publicity. Who can build the biggest logo? Who can get the most online child slaves to place Obsidian or whatever? That's the stuff that gets you noticed in 2021. None of these big projects are ever done because of what they are said to accomplish. You think the overworld water cube was actually built to stop new fags? No, of course not. It made it easier for new fags because it makes you spawn on the convenient obsidian roof. And look at the horizon wall, a thick layer of obsidian surrounding spawns, stopping all new players in their tracks. No, obviously not. People are just gonna dig fucking holes through it and wither it. And the groups that build these projects, or the leaders at least, know this fully well. I know they play 2B2T, but they aren't completely brain dead. They know that these projects never actually really do much in the ways of stopping new fags, which is what many of them claim to be made to do, but that's not the point. They do them because it gets them known, it gets them respected, and if all things go to plan, they could get that juicy FitMC video that so many players long for. And all of this is made possible through the use of external platforms like Discord, Reddit, and YouTube. Over the past decade, just like most things on 2B2T, groups and group conflicts have evolved drastically. From the days when conflicts never really got past edgy teenagers shouting the N-word to each other in chat, to the golden age of massive spawn battles from 2016 to 2019, to now when the traditional means of PvP and griefing are all but meaningless without some kind of online presence. 2B2T has gone from a server where players would rarely talk to each other outside of Minecraft, to a server that has basically become its very own fucking social platform in conjunction with Discord. And I'm sure that players in another 10 years from now, if the server's even still around then, will look back on us and think the exact same thing. But who knows, on a server like 2B2T, where the only thing constant is its map, and the only thing decreasing is the average IQ and age of its players, only time will tell. Thanks for watching.
This is what I've been waiting for. Let's go. Whoa! Oh no!
Oh my god, you stinky Russia. How dare you kill Kingfish, stinky Russia.